Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Friday, November 8th, 2019. I am Dave Biddle. Very happy to be joined by Jonah Booker for his usual Friday visit. JBook, you and I have not spoken since the college football playoff rankings were released on Tuesday. Just your reaction when you saw the Buckeyes were number 1, Penn State number 4, just anything you want to say about the CFP rankings, sir?
Yeah, I was a little surprised that they had Ohio State at number 1. I thought they were going to put LSU in that spot. My projection was I thought Ohio State was going to be at the number 2 spot, but clearly the playoff committee, they really like what Ohio State has done thus far this season, so it's a pleasant surprise. Penn State being at number 4, I kind of suspected that they could be there, but I thought they would probably give a little bit more respect to Clemson, even though Clemson hasn't played up to their potential this year. So that was a surprise there. And, you know, it kind of – and a lot of people speculated thinking that the playoff committee is kind of setting up a little showdown for drama, having LSU and Alabama right there at 2 or 3 and Ohio State at 1 or 4 with, you know, all 4 teams playing head-to-head. So it's going to be interesting, but I think Ohio State is in a position to control their own destiny. The one thing that I'm really going to be interested in seeing is how they view Ohio State after this Maryland game and then the winner of the Alabama-LSU game. I think that would tell a lot there. If they keep Ohio State in that one slot after that matchup, then that tells you that they really, really think very highly of Ohio State.
I could be wrong here, but I tend to think regardless of what happens, if Ohio State could win 100-0 against Maryland, and whoever wins that game between LSU and Alabama could be by a field goal, I think LSU-Alabama winner is going to jump Ohio State. But I think it's irrelevant. Here's why, J-Book. See if you disagree with me here. I feel like if Ohio State then beats Penn State 2 weeks from now, then Ohio State will jump LSU or Alabama, whoever wins that game. So I feel like if Ohio State wins out, they're going to be number 1. I could be wrong, though. I mean, just what are your thoughts on that?
No, I 100% agree with you. It's irrelevant right now. I truly believe that the winner of the LSU-Alabama game is going to slide to that 1 spot. But if you look at what Ohio State has coming down the stretch, I think is really going to set them up to secure that 1 spot if they could win out. If they can get an undefeated Penn State team, because if Penn State wins against Minnesota, they're going to treat that as a very favorable data point for Penn State, because they already said that Penn State body of work is really impressive, and they're really valuing Penn State's strength of schedule. So if you have Penn State beating an undefeated Minnesota, that's only going to bolster that, which can help Ohio State down the road. And then if you look at Michigan, I fully expect Michigan to keep winning until they play Ohio State, and then you go 3 weeks in a row playing potentially 9-and-up winners here, because you have the Big Ten champion who will be a 10-win, and then you have Michigan who's going to be 9 wins. So I fully expect Ohio State, if they handle their business, they will be the 1 seed. Now the big question would be is if Ohio State gets that 1 seed, will they decide to go out here to Phoenix, or will they want to stay a little closer to home in Atlanta?
And to me, it depends on who the opponent is. I mean, if it's a Pac-12 team, if it's Oregon, not that I think Ohio State should be scared to play Oregon and the Phoenix area and Glendale, but I mean, if it's a Pac-12 team, have them come out to Atlanta. If you're playing a Southern team, if for some reason Clemson is 4th, or if anarchy happens and 2 SEC teams get in, the loser of Alabama, LSU wins out and they get in as the 4 seed, then you take them out to Tempe, or not Tempe anymore. I think about the glory days there, JBook, in Tempe, Arizona. As I have my cat Tempe on my lap right now, I got a story to tell. I don't think I've ever told this on the show before. My wife and I were newlyweds. We got a cat right after Ohio State beat Michigan in 2002. So before the 2002 National Championship game, we named him Tempe, and I know it's Tempe, but we named him Tempe because Ohio State was going to the National Championship game in Tempe, Arizona, and my wife was like, well, but what if they lose? And I'm like, just them getting there is like house money at this point. And I thought they had a good, chance of winning, so we named our cat Tempe, and he is still here, alive and kicking at 17 years old. But yeah, man, I think it's going to be Glendale if it's one of the southern schools. If Ohio State's the number 1 seed, and I think it'll be Atlanta if it's a Pac-12 school that Ohio State will be faced up against.
Right, and Ohio State, the following out here is pretty deep in Phoenix area. I mean, for the Michigan game, they have block parties, and they rope off in the entire streets and the whole corridor there in Old Town Scottsdale because there's so many Ohio State fans here. So if Ohio State has the opportunity to come out here, they will not be short on fan support. And I would love to pull one of these SEC teams out of their region. That's the thing that you look at from the SEC teams is typically a lot of these high-end marquee games are right there in their footprint in the backyard in New Orleans or Atlanta at the Peach Bowl or Dallas or Florida somewhere right there in their neck of the woods, and you get them away from where they're comfortable at and get them on the road. I really like Ohio State coming out here if they can handle their business.
I suppose we should talk some Ohio State, Maryland tomorrow, high noon, Big 10 kickoff, or Big Noon kickoff, I should say. Anything to worry about tomorrow? I guess maybe other than injuries, that's the one thing I'm concerned about. Just get out of this game healthy and get the backups in there early. Do you have any concerns about this game tomorrow?
No major concerns here. Just want to make sure that everybody, as you mentioned, gets out of this game pretty healthy. I think Ohio State, I don't see them looking ahead whatsoever. I think they're going to come in here coming off a bye week. They'll be focused. They'll be ready to go. I fully expect Maryland to come out here and give it their all. I know a lot of people were concerned, saying, hey, don't be looking ahead against Maryland. You saw what happened last year at Maryland where they took this team to the wire. This is two totally different Ohio State teams. I think the leadership under Ryan Day has really enhanced the focus with this football team. He's really got the pulse of this team to where he's preaching to these guys consistently one game at a time. Us here in the media and the fans, we can talk about, the future and playoffs and things of that nature, but inside that locker room, those guys are focused on Maryland and beating the brakes off Maryland. And the one thing that I would like to see is if we get up big, get those guys out of there by halftime. You want them to be rested for that stretch run in November. Get those backups in there. I think, if you can get Master T all the touches he needs and get JK out of there, knock some of that rust off after the bye week, but after the game starts to get out of hand, get them out of there and get them rested up.
Yeah, very well said. You mentioned this game earlier. Penn State at Minnesota tomorrow, also at noon, which is too bad. I'd like to actually watch this game. Are you intrigued by this game? Do you think Minnesota could perhaps pull off the upset?
I am intrigued with this game because I think Penn State going on the road is going to tell us a whole lot. We don't know how good Minnesota really is because they've had a pretty weak schedule. But one thing that you can definitely count on is Minnesota is going to bring that energy, especially in that first half. The crowd's going to be into it. This is probably one of the biggest games that they've had on their campus in years since, 90s, 80s when Ohio State showed up and it was top 25 matchups. But the thing that you have to look at is Penn State's offense is a very boom or bust offense. They can hit those big shots with Hamlin, and they can score really fast, but their offense has a tendency to get really bogged down. And that's the one thing about Minnesota is Minnesota's getting better on both sides of the ball. Their offense is really getting better. Obviously, the line right now is Penn State 6.5. I think Minnesota is going to come out early on in that first half and give Penn State all they can handle. The question I have is, does Minnesota have enough depth to compete with Penn State once they've given them their best shot? If they can't knock Penn State out early, I don't know if Minnesota has enough depth on that team come the third and fourth quarter to pull away from Penn State and hold them down on the mat. I think Penn State will win this game. I think it will be a close game, but I would not be surprised if Minnesota jumps on them early and you start to see Penn State to really start to exert their will later on in the game.
Last thing, going back to Ohio State, I love the way this team is embracing this number one ranking. You know, they're not shying away from it. They're not saying like, oh, we're not, you know, we're just looking at Maryland. I mean, they are saying they're focused on Maryland, but you know what I mean? They're not like saying like they don't know what's going on and they're shying away from it. Ryan Day is flat out saying to his team, to the media, to, you know, on his radio show yesterday that, you know, these, and he's reiterated this is nothing new, but these opportunities do not come around every year. And this team will never be this team again. I mean, they could be very good next year too, but this is the only year this team's going to be this team. Certain guys are going to be graduating. Certain guys will leave early for the NFL and whatnot. And they just seem to be embracing this. I love Ryan Day, what he's doing across the board, JBook, but I really like his attitude here specifically. And it seems like, you know, as usual, you know, the players reflect the mindset of their coach. I just like the way they're not being cocky about it, but they are embracing the fact that they are the number one team in the nation.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating psychological study here with this team, because what have we seen in the past with Ohio State, and you see it with Clemson and a lot of the top teams. They use the disrespect card, or the card to where I want to have a chip on my shoulder because nobody believes in us. But Ryan Day is kind of taking the approach in the opposite direction, where he's telling this team, embrace the spotlight, embrace being number one. You are the best team in college football. You've worked hard to be where you're at right now. So don't shy away from the spotlight. Run to the spotlight, because you are the best football team in America. And we're going to go out and we're going to perform like we're the best football team in America, and we're not going to shy away from expectations. This is Ohio State. We have high expectations here. We're not going to shy away from being number one, because we've performed like we're the best team in college football thus far, and we're going to continue to. And he preaches that message to his team, and it's contagious, because once you start having that confidence and you really start believing that this is who you are and where you belong, the message trickles all the way down to everybody on the roster. And I know, you know, past years in the 2014 team, they played the disrespect card, but it's really, really cool to see this Ohio State team embracing the target on their back, and they want to step up to the challenge to be great. And as Ryan Day said, this doesn't come around very often. You know, as for all the years that we've been watching Ohio State, and since the playoff has started, they've never been the number one team in the country. And this is where they are right now, and they earned that. So don't be afraid of being number one. Take on all challengers and show no mercy as you continue to whoop anybody who stands in front of you.
Great stuff as always from Jonah Booker. This is exactly why I get like a million requests to have more JBook. And I'm like, you know, JBook has a full-time job. We'd have him on like every day if we could. But we feel like we bug him enough as is. But coming strong as always, JBook. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate all the listeners out there for tuning into the show. If you're listening on iTunes and you like the show, give us a 5-star review. It really helps. Enjoy the game tomorrow, Bucknutters. Let's hit Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.